Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, right at the top of the Amud. The mission discussed some of the Ma'asim Tovim of the Tzadikim and to discuss Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yoina, Ksiv, it says, Lachein achalek lo v'rabim, it says, I will divide him, and I will sign his portion from the Rabbim, from the multitudes, v'tatzum yachalek shalal, and he'll divide his spoils with the mighty. So who's that person that has these riches, he has these spoils, and he divides it amongst the other people? Zeh Rabbi Akiva, it's referring to Rabbi Akiva, Shehiskin Mishnah Umidrash Halachas V'Agados. That's Rabbi Akiva that he organized and set up the Mishnah, the Midrash Halachas V'Agados, the format, the basic format for the Mishnah, where his Talmidim, Rabbi Meir, and Rebbe, the Rameir was his Talmud, and Rebbe was the Talmud of Rameir, that eventually it became the the format for the Mishnah that we have, and the organization of the Mishnah and the Halachos and the Agoras that were organized in the manner, in the fashion that we have it, with the Sidorim that we have it. And therefore he was Rabbi Akiva, that he was the source of that he divided the riches, the spoils, amongst the multitudes, the Rabbim, for Klal Yisrael, that they were able to benefit from the clarity that he gave to the learning, the teachings of the Torah. V'yesham, some say, Elo Anshe Knesset Gedolah. Ve'elo Anshe Knesset Gedolah tiknu. That Anshe Knesset Gedolah Masak in the Midrash Halachos V'Agodos. Elo Ma Tikin Zeh, what was it that Rabbi Akiva was Masakin? Klolos Apratos. He was Masakin, the Klolos, the generalizations, and the protos, the specific items, the specifications. So, Lamashal, the Yud Gimel Midas, that Torah Nidreshes Bahem were Klolos, and Rabbi Akiva, he's the one that set the Klolim, the Gedorim for these Yud Gimel Midas. So, the Gemara, we just said Rabbi Akiva, he was praised for organizing the Torah and making it a way that people could learn the Torah and it could be taught to the Rabbim. So the Gemara continues. It says in the Pasuk, the families of the Seifrim who lived in Yavitz. Who's it referring to when it says the Seifrim? So who's the Seifrim? So what does it mean by that? Why does it term and refer to the teaching of the Torah, the ones who taught the Torah as Seifrim? Elashal says the Torah is Sfaris. We learn out from that the ones who taught the Torah, they organized the Torah in lists. The Seifrim, they counted it, they made lists, and therefore they facilitated the teaching of the Torah. For instance, they said, Chamisha lo yitraimu truma. There are 5 people who should not separate Truma. That these 5 people should not separate Truma, so they made it in a list of it, that to be organized so a person should be able to remember it. So there's 5 who should not separate the Truma. That helps you to remember it, that 5 people who cannot do it. And Chamisha Dvorim Chayim V'Cholim. And they also had another list, the 5 types of grain, which are Chayiv in the Cholim. So, for instance, rice is not chayiv in the challah, it's the 5 types of grain. So they made a list in order for you to remember and organize it in a way that we should remember it and to have clarity in what the halach is. Another example is Chamisha Esrei Noshim Paichus Soraseim. There's 15 type of women that pater their Soraseim, their co-wives from Yibam. Then if a man dies without children, his wife falls to Yibam. If he, in earlier times, he could marry 2 wives. So both of the women fall to Yibam, and then there has to be, they can't marry unless there is a Yibam or a Chalitza. Now, if one of the Sorais are an Erva, meaning that the Yavam, the brother, cannot marry him. For instance, if you have 2 brothers married to 2 sisters, so the living brother can't marry the widow because it's his wife's sister. She not only paters her, but paters the co-wife, the other wife of the nifter. There's 15 of these cases. Shloishim v'sheish krisa b'Torah. Another example is the 36 cases where there are averes of a person who's really avera, he's chayiv koros. For instance, if a person is mechal Shabbos, b'mezid, but there are no edim and asra, so he doesn't have mitzvahs bezdin, but he's chayiv koros. There's 36 cases of that. For instance, chaylev and dam, etc. 13 halachas are mentioned by the case of the nevela of a knife tahar. Knife tahar has a unique halacha that it's mitama, but only mitama beisabliya, by swallowing. It's not like mitama like an animal, a nevela of a behema, which is mitama b'magid masa. This is different, that it's in the mitama beisabliya. So there are 13 halachas mentioned regarding the case of the nevela of a knife tahar. Arbavas nezikin, the 4 categories of nezikin. Shor v'amor mav v'hever. If a person's ox damages in one of those types of situations, or if he digs a bore in the Rishus Harabim, etc. So there's 4 categories, primary categories of nezikin. Avos malachas arboim chaser achas. And the malachas of Shabbos and the Hilchos Shabbos, there are 39 avos malachas. So they made categories, so you should be able to remember the halachas. Omer Rabbi Acha, Ksiv, the pasuk says, Ezra Hakaina Sefer. The pasuk says, it refers to Ezra, the famous Ezra Kaina Sefer. Now it repeats this description of a Sefer. It says, LeEzra Kaina Sefer, Sefer Divrei Mitzvos Hashem V'chukav Al Yisrael. So why does it repeat that he's a Sefer? It repeats it. So Matam Lam Sefer, why does it repeat Sefer? Just like he counted the words of the Torah, he also made lists, made counting, he counted the words of the Chachamim. So we learned that the Chachamim, the earlier Chachamim, made lists. They tried to make it easier and clarify the Torah that people shouldn't forget. Nevertheless, we still are not able to comprehend the whole Torah. Rabbi Chage v'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, he says, in the early generations, they plowed and planted. Nikshu v'kischu odru, they weeded, they removed the weeds, they trimmed the crops, odru, and they hoed them. Kosru and imru, they harvested, they gathered up the crops. Da'adashu, zaro, baru, they threshed, they winnowed, and they removed the chaff, they separated it, tachnu, and they ground out the wheat into flour, hirkiru, they sifted it, lashu, they kneaded the dough, kitfu, va'afu, they formed the challahs, and they baked them. So they did all of this for us. They prepared everything for us. They prepared the suda, so to speak, for us, that we have the bread it's been all processed and baked and ready to eat. And we have nothing to eat, meaning in spite of all the efforts to clarify it for us, to organize it for us, to make a list for us, we can't comprehend the Torah. Rabbi Abba bar Amina B'Shem Rabbi Zira, he said, in Havan Kadamim Malachim, he said, if the earlier generation, the previous generations, if they were in the Madrega of Malachim, of angels, Anu B'nai Nash, we are in a low Madrega, there's the Yeridus of Dares, we'd be considered to be mere mortals, just humans. V'in Hava B'nai Enosh, but if you would treat them, if they're considered to be humans, then Anu Chamorn, we'd be considered only donkeys. Amar Rav Mana Vahi Shaita Amen, they said at that time, Afilu Chamra Darapelis Manyar Loi Idminan. We'd be considered to be donkeys, but not even donkeys like to the Darga, the Madrega of Rapelis Manyar. We'd be considered to be just plain simple donkeys, not even that type of a donkey. So what is this Maisa with the donkey of Rapelis Manyar? Chamra to Rapelis Manyar, his donkey Genaftal Istoya Belela. He was once stolen by robbers at night. The donkey had 3 days, he was hidden by them, and he didn't eat anything. So he refused to eat the fodder that they gave to him. After 3 days, they decided to return it. to return the donkey to Pinchas ben Yair. Amri, they said, Avkinu min hachat temus gabon. Since the donkey wasn't eating, they were afraid that the donkey would die. They said, remove it from here so it doesn't die in our possession. Abkinu, they set her free. Azaz v'kamasla atar damar. She went and stood at the gate of Pinchas ben Yair, Shares menahakas, and started to cry out, to bray. Amar loin, Pinchas ben Yair said to the Shamashim, Pasun alachada alufta, open the gate for this poor donkey. This because she has 3 days and she didn't eat anything. Pasun law, Valas law, they opened the gate and she came in. Amar loin, Pinchas ben Yair said to his Shamashim, Yavan klum teichel, give her something to eat. Yavan kumasarim v'loy bois l'mechel, they gave her barley, but she didn't want to eat it. Amrin lei, they said to her, Rebbe, loy bois l'mechel, she doesn't want to eat. Amar loin, misakin inon, did you sift it? Did you clean it out from impurities? Amra lein, they said yes. Amra loin varimta damyan, did you separate the trumas of maisers, meaning did you separate the maisers and take it out of the status of being demai? The demai is the crops of the Amayaratzim, which are nechshad, they were suspected of not removing the maisers. So they asked them, did you remove the maisers to ensure that it did not have a status even of demai, not only of something which has certainly the trumas of maisers were not removed from, not only something which is tevel, but even something which was demai. Did you ensure that there wasn't even a suffix of trumas of maisers over here? Amalei, loy. He says, no, we didn't bother to do that. Ken often Rebbe, this is what you taught us. If a person buys from an Amaretz, meaning an Amaretz, someone who's suspected of not removing trumas of maisers, if he's if he buys those seeds for the purpose of planting or to feed to his behemoth, to his animal, not for his own consumption, then we say, then when he buys it, or kemach l'oris, or he buys flour to the tanning of the skins of the hides, or shemen l'or, or oil not for consumption, but for burning to use as fuel for the lamps, potter min adamai. If it's only demai, then he's potter. He doesn't have to be mafresh the maisus, and this is food, it's fodder for the donkey, for the animal. We don't have to remove the maisus. We don't have to be mafresh maisus. Amar loin, Pinchas ben Yair said to them, Ma nabel l'hada, what can we do for this poor donkey? Dehi machma al garma asagen, that she's very machmer on herself. So what can we do? In right, make her a din, that's correct. But this donkey has to be machmer. Varim and damen v'achla. So they were mafresh to the demai, and the donkey ate it. So we're not on the madrega of a donkey, that kind of a donkey, even for Pinchas ben Yair, just a simple donkey. The Mishnah continues, says, Pesachia alakinim. Pesachia, he was in charge of the birds, the pairs of birds that were needed for karbonos, for the kinim, he was in charge of it. The Gemara says, Boirei, come and see, Madol goycha shel oisa ish. Say how great Pesachia, how great he was. Shehu peiseach dvarim v'dorsha, because he unravels the mysterious items, the things which are hidden, that people didn't understand. He was capable of unraveling that and explaining it. So, as the Gemara now explains, Yedei b'shivim loshen, it says Pesachia knew 70 languages. Tani, we learned in the Brisa, Sanhedrin sheyesh bo shnayim sheyochel ledaber, a Sanhedrin that has 2 dayanim that know all 70 languages, and V'kulin ru'il mishoy, and the rest of the dayanim do not know how to speak the 70 languages, but they understand it. Harei a real Sanhedrin. That's a Sanhedrin. That's a kosher Sanhedrin. Shloisha harei beinus. If it has 3 dayanim who know all 70 languages, that's considered a middle madrega of a Sanhedrin. Arba harei chacham. If it has 4 dayanim, it's considered to be a wise Sanhedrin. Ubi Yavna hayu barbo, and in Yavna there were 4 4 of the Dayanim that knew all 70 languages. Who were they? Ben Azai, uben Zaima, uben Chachinoi, Rabbi ben Masya. They were the ones that knew all 70 languages. Amar Rav Chisda said, Pamachas Yav Sheretz Yisrael. So now the Gemara is going to illustrate how Pesachia, his wisdom, that he was able to unravel the mysterious items, the items that other people didn't understand. So what was the Maisa? Rav Chisda said, Pamachas Yav Sheretz Yisrael. There was a drought in Eretz Yisrael. They didn't have grain. And they did not know where to bring the barley for the Minchas Omer, because there was a drought. Where was there the new crops, the new barley for the Omer? V'hava taman achad ilam. There was an ilam, a deaf mute. So he couldn't communicate directly and to tell the barley, but he knew where there was this barley. He put one hand, he mentioned to the roof, he showed it up to the roof, and and the other hand on a hut. So he had one hand to the roof and the other hand to the hut. So Ayitune come Psachia, and they brought him for Psachia, so they're trying to understand what he was saying. Omer Lahu, he asked them, Is Acha Asa the Miskaya Gagais Strifen or Strifen Gagais? Is there a place that's called either Gagais Strifen Strifen Gagais? He understood that Gagais, one hand to the roof, is referring to Gag, and to a hut is Strifen. It must be a place that's called Gagais Strifen or Strifen Gagais. So Aslina Lataman Vashkan, and they found the place over there that they had the barley. And there was a place, Gagas Strifen or Strifen Gagais. They searched and they did find the Chodash, the new barley from that place that they could bring for the Minchas Omer. Another Maisa was Amar Rav Yesa be Rabbi Boon Pamachas Nishtav Kolam Kula. One time there was all the crops were destroyed by the wind. And they didn't know from where they were going to get the Omer. And there was again a Maisa with a deaf mute that was over there. He put one hand on his eyes, V'yada al sukhra, and other hand on the door, on the socket to the door. So I assume they brought him in front of Pesachia to try to decipher what he was referring to. Amar Loin, he asked them, Is Asa de Miskaya Ein Seicher Ayin? Is there a place called Ein Seicher Ayin? I mean, he understood that the socket of the door, it didn't mean literally the socket of the door, it was Ein, one eye to the eye, and Seicher to the socket, Ein Seicher Ayin. Va'azel Taman Va'ashkon, and they went there and they found the barley. Another Maisa, Sholosh Noshim Yiviu Kinei. There were 3 women that brought their birds. They brought the birds for the base of Mikdash. Achas Hameres La'inasi. One said, I'm bringing you this pair of birds as a korban for my Eina. Va'achas Aimeres. The other one says, Liamosi, I'm bringing it for my Yoma. Va'achas Aimeres Lazivosi, I'm bringing it for my Ziva. So what were they referring to? Which korbanos were they? Was the korban coming on account of what? So the other Chachamim understood it to mean they thought it was referring to a Zova, and she said Leinosi, and means for the flow of the dam, means the flow of the dam like a spring. Amar Loin, but Pesachia said to them, no, Ba'aina Sekant. He said it was not referring to a zivus. It's not a korban for a zivus, one for a chatos, one for an oila. It's a nedova. She was giving thanksgiving Hashem because her eye was endangered and she recovered, and therefore she brought the korban. So it's not it's a nedova. It's not a chatos and an oila. It's not a chiyuv for her zivus. Again, in the case where the one that says liyamase, they also understood it to be for the zivus, and a chat, one for chatas, one for an oila, and they thought it meant to refer to zivus that there was a flow of dam like a yam. Amar Loy, no, b'yama sakant. He said same type of idea. She was endangered out in the sea, and now she is using a korban and a dova because she was saved. Zusha meres l'zivosi savan meimar zova mamish. The one that says zivose, the one they thought to mean that she was a zova. azava, and she's bringing a korban for her tahara from her zivus. But he said to her, Amar loin zeiv litol esbenah. She was saved from a wolf, and that's why she's bringing this nedavam. Ben Achia, so it says Ben Achia was in charge of the treatments for the cholemayim, for the stomach ailments that the Kohanim had. So why did the Kohanim have this, specifically the Kohanim have these stomach ailments? Because on Yudei Shayu Kohanim Ahalchim Yechefim on the Ritzvah, they go barefoot on the stone floors of the base of Mikdash. Vayoichlim Balshad, they would eat large quantities of meat, v'shleis and and drink water. Vayoboim L'dei cholemayim, they would come to cholemayim to have stomach disorders. V'havi Yada, and Ben Achia knew, Hai den chamra tav lamaya, this type of wine is good for the stomach. Hai den chama sama lamaya, and this type of wine weakens the stomach, the bowels. So he was an expert in this matter. Nechunya chayfer shichen, he would be the digger of ditches. Shaya chayfer shichen amaris, he would dig the ditches and cave. V'havi Yada, and he knew, Hai den cave mekar maya, which rock would cool the waters. Hai den cave ispe sharvui, and which rock had heat. How far would the rock's heat extend? So he was an expert in these matters. He was therefore in charge of the digging of the ditches and caves.